stewardess syndrome. And as you can see by the description here, the meaning of that title, it's a psychological condition that people in the service industry experience, where essentially you suffer the fate of potentially being fired for not smiling. So that's something that I draw a lot of connections to in terms of just like cultural connections, personal connections, and I'll just talk a little bit about that. I think there's also associated with that, like the psychological condition, there's also connections to painting itself. So there's something going on underneath like the surface of the paint, and that's always been something I'm interested in. So like the history underneath the painting, like the underdrawing, the underpainting, the planning and research involved, as well as the artist's personal baggage that they're bringing to the piece. That's also just like the viewer's baggage that they bring to the painting, and they're also projecting. And therein lies a discourse or a dialogue between the viewer and the painter. So these are all just some connections that I made. But there's a quote that I liked a lot that I think resonates well with this painting, and the quote comes from a Tim Griffin article in Artforum, where he was discussing the work of Robert Longo. The work that he was discussing was a large-scale charcoal drawing of a wave, and he talked about how the shape of a wave is actually informed by not the weather patterns surrounding it, but the shoal beneath it. And so the connection I'm making here is that the facial expression that we have, that we give to the public, doesn't always reflect the emotions that we're experiencing internally. Just like this painting, there's a lot underneath it, and yet there's this kind of like glowing, a lot of moments that are kind of like happy, kind of contrasted by things that might be a little more brooding or a little bit more complex, emotionally speaking. So that's pretty much what I have to say about this painting, and I'd love to answer any questions that people have. And here maybe if, I know you guys are probably mostly museum workers, so if this resonates at all to you, I'd love to hear about that as well. So does anybody have any questions?
Is it multimedia or just oil paint?
It's oil and acrylic. And airbrush.
I'm sorry that I missed all of your talk.
No worries.
And you might have gone over some of this, but where do you work? What's your museum connection?
So I work at a gallery at Montserrat College of Art
Oh, cool.
in Beverly.
Oh, cool. Is there like a front of house position?
It's more like art handling and install.
Okay.
But in terms of like this, the connection I have to this would be like working in the service industry.
Yeah.
So I've been like a waiter at a table. I've been a barista for a long time. So I've done a lot of like interfacing with the public in like restaurant work.
Been at the mercy of others.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you find that those skills transfer into the museum world at all?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I think any type of like professional position like prepares you for the next thing. Just working with others and like, keeping a smile on your face, whether you're happy or not.
Yes, for sure. The masks help with that. Though,
That's so true.
Sorry, I feel like I just interviewed you.
That's perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's hard to just talk off the top of my head, so I appreciate questions. Anyone else?
I wonder when you were creating this painting, I think my question is did you constantly kind of recall every memories you had while you were, when you were working in the service industry, or you were just I think I'm more interested in motivation, while you were creating this piece, what kind of things were you doing?
That's a good question. Yeah, that I should have talked about that. So I'll just talk a little bit about like my process in general. It'll eventually circle back to that. But so this canvas was actually, a lot of my materials are kind of inherited from friends of mine. So like a lot of my friends after art school have stopped painting, or they've moved on to something else, and I've just like inherited tons of canvases and paint and stuff. So this canvas belonged to a friend of mine named Tim McCool. He was in, I don't know if any of you know him, he was in Boston for a long time.
Yeah.
You know him?
Oh yeah. 9 of 10.
Yeah, he's a really sweet guy. But there's tons of texture on the canvas, so I had to sand it down, and it's still like it feels like his painting is still very much there. And I like that. I like to like kind of inherit someone else's history and work over that. And so I'm talking a lot about layers here and like what's beneath the surface. Like this to me this is like a mask coming off the face. But in terms of like what my plan was, I'm really reactive in my work, so I'm always experimenting. I want to see what happens when you mix certain materials and like when things dry. Just playing with all of the like restrictions of media and just seeing what happens. And so that like this concept didn't really come to me until really late in the game as far as painting goes. And I was listening to a podcast that brought up the stewardess syndrome stuff, and I was like, oh, that's in here. So that's kind of how I come up with concepts.
Did you find that there were like materials that you preferred playing with, or any that you hated?
Any that I hated, I don't like gouache.
Why?
It's so hard. I don't like acrylic paint because it dries
Okay.
really fast.
Yeah.
I love oil, and the airbrush is so much fun.
Oh, is that the like sprayer thing?
Yeah, it's a lot like spray paint, but you can like make a palette and then like dump it in the airbrush, and you can like really refine like the width, depending on how far back and like the way that you play with it. So anything that like kind of allows you to be really playful is like my favorite. And oil is like the most forgiving medium. You can just wipe it right off the canvas.
Oh, cool. Can I come a little closer to look?
Absolutely, yeah.
How long did it take you?
I work on usually about 10 paintings at once, and I try to wrap them up within a year. That's always my goal. So I'll say a year.
Wow.
But,
Do the colors have meaning to you?
Yeah, definitely. Like this reminds me of like a very idyllic, like almost like the water in like a pool or in like the Caribbean Ocean or something. And like these patterns feel almost like cynically joyful. And then like this is like a major contrast to that. Like this kind of like metallic, almost like a rusty metal. So that would again kind of play with like duality, like something that's on the surface doesn't reflect what's underneath it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions or thoughts? I love hearing what people think when they see things. That's always exciting to me. I think what I think is just like a fraction of what other people bring to painting. So it's always something I like to hear.
Well, I do think it's funny that you said the color evokes a Caribbean sort of thing, because that figure on the mid left, the white looking thing with the sort of red, looks like a fish. You know,
Yeah.
that it looks like those sort of lionfish, but for a little sort
Like the
of things
angelfish?
almost.
Mhm.
Yeah, or something like that, because, and then the sort of whole thing looks very fish tankish behind this figure. Coral. I hate making something so like literal. Like, what does it look like? Like we're looking at clouds and we're 6 years old or something.
No,
It's
I
not the way
like.
my brain works. But then when you say Caribbean, I'm like, wow.
There we go. Yeah. No, I like hearing that. That's great. Anybody else? Those are all great questions and comments. I appreciate it.
And also, do you know too, who was working like
At BCA?
ICA?
Oh, I didn't know you worked with the SCA.
He also participated in the first video show.
No way.
And I think I was bought his work.
Oh, that's perfect.
And then the window, yeah.
Yeah. That's great. That's great that one of his canvases is in this show.
Yeah. I knew you so long and I didn't know, typical.
Yeah.
It's a small family museum world.
Yeah. Yeah, Boston's tiny,
Yeah.
especially the art world here.
Especially anyone connected to Shaheen.
Oh, yeah.
She is on his way.
He's on his way.
Yes.
next